Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. O.P. Verma from Himachal Pradesh University, Shimla. Today we are going to talk on module Models of Organization Change from paper Organizational Change and Development. After studying the entire text, you will be able to understand importance of different models to implement change. Levin 3-step model, Kotter's 8-step plan, system model of change, Levin model of change, action research model of change. Let's start with the introduction. Change can be seen from two perspectives. On the one hand, it can be evolutionary, and on the other hand, it can be revolutionary in nature. When we take any change as an evolutionary change, then we consider it as a slow and gradual but a continuous process. In such situation, management takes incremental steps to bring any proposed change. On the other side, when we take any change as a revolutionary one, then it mainly talks of taking a huge and a sudden leap which is bold and transformative in nature. But any change, whether it is evolutionary or revolutionary, active or proactive, strategic or incremental, it needs to follow a certain sequence in order to bring any transformation in any organization. Before initiating the process of bringing any change in the organization, the management needs to examine and evaluate the change and accordingly draw a pattern of how to effectively initiate and implement the organization change in order to achieve greater positive outcome. Models of managing organizational change. There are several popular approaches which are adopted by different organizations for managing changes in their respective fields. For many years, several authors and writers have tried to come up with different models to manage change. Some of them are discussed here. Levin 3-step model of organizational change. Levin model has remained a prominent model for the better understanding the process of organizational change throughout many years. Many authors, writers, researchers, as well as consultants have applied this model to implement change which is necessary for the organization to work with environmental changes. The Levin 3-step model basically focuses on unfreezing the status quo movement to be desired state, and at the end refreezing the new change to make it permanent. But when the organizations follow this entire process to initiate any change, it is confronted with the forces, some of which are called driving forces and some are called resisting forces. The driving are the forces that motivates the organizations to move further for a new state of affairs. Say, it can be environmental, technological, market-driven, political, and legal, etc. The other side consists of resisting forces, which are pushing back the organization into its old form, such as employees' feeling of insecurity and uncertainty, threat to position, power, resources, and economic benefits, etc. Now, within the tug-in-war between the driving and restraining forces, it is pertinent that driving forces must have more valence in comparison to resisting forces in order to successfully implement the required change. Levin model gives a simple idea to bring a plant change by following a three-step process. That is unfreezing, movement, refreezing. Step 1. Unfreezing is the step into which people working in an organization become aware of the need for change. It is the most essential step of change management, as it helps to find out why any change is required. To answer this why, managers prepare a list of prominent reasons that can satisfy this question. The reasons enlisted must be strong enough to negotiate with the employees working in the organization, for they are the only one who are going to implement the change successfully. The employees who are going to get affected by the change must be properly communicated and consulted within proper time. Each person's concern must be properly consulted and should be satisfied with justified reasons. If there come a resistance from the employees which is extremely high, management must resort to both reducing, resisting, and increasing the attractiveness of the change offer. Step 2. Change signifies movement from one situation to the other desired situation. It might call for installation of new technologies, change of location, restructuring the existing organization structure, or anything that alter the pre-existing activities and relationship. But any change needs to be quick in order to have its effectiveness. Step 3. Refreezing makes the implanted change permanent and resistant to further changes. For any change to be fruitful, it needs to be refreezed so that it can sustain over time. If it is not refreezed, then there is great degree of chance that the change will be short-lived and the employees would be returning to the previous state. Kotter's 8-step plan of organizational change. John Kotters of the Harvard Business School created a detailed approach for organizational change based on Kurt Levin 3-step model. The detailed approach consists of 8 major steps that need to be followed if any organizational change is to be implemented. The steps are: establish a sense of urgency by creating a compelling reason for why change is needed. Form a coalition to enough power to lead the change. Create a new vision to direct the change and strategies for achieving the vision. Communicate the vision throughout the organization. Empower others to act on the vision by removing barriers to change, encouraging risk taking, and creating problem solving. Plan for, create and reward short-term wins that move the organization towards the new vision. Consolidate improvement, recess changes, and make necessary adjustments in the new programs. Reinforce the changes by demonstrating the relationship between new behavior and organizational success. Kotter model for organization change is basically originated to overcome the failure that managers usually face with initiating any change in the organization. It focuses on the loopholes which is usually faced by the managerial staff, which creates an obstacle in initiating and driving the change. The first 4 steps of the model cited here represents the unfreezing stage. These steps particularly focus on the part of managers to assess the strong points of needs to change, bring out from those points the valid reason having a strong hold, which can also form a new vision for the employees to be satisfied and agreeing with the change requirements. Step 5 through step 7 represents movement. These steps primarily focus on implementing in actual terms the vision for which the whole process is initiated. Here, the managers have an important responsibility to check time and again and try to assess if the process is moving further. On to this stage, managers need to be careful with the variations in the efforts and try to make necessary changes as and when required. System model of organizational change. As we know that organizations are system of relationship between different elements. These elements interact with each other and collectively make activities happen. To implement any change successfully, change needs to be organization wide. In this model, 6 variables collectively describes an organization and says that it is because of the interaction between these variables activities takes place. The 6 variables are people, culture, task, technology, design and strategy. The people variable calls for individuals giving their services in the organization. It includes employees' personalities, attitude, perception, behavior, and motives. The culture variable collectively shows the shared values and beliefs of different individuals, which is reflected to outside world. The technology variable represents the organizational adaptiveness towards new technology and automation in their working. The design shows the formal organizational structure of relationship through which flows the control, authority and responsibility. The task determine the description of the nature of work to be performed, and at last the strategy determine the organizational plan to achieve its aims, objectives and goals, with the fulfillment of which the organizations are going to attain its vision. Thus, the model itself shows that all these 6 variables are interrelated to each other in one way or the other. Any slight change in one variable is bound to show its effect on the other variables. Therefore, this approach helps the management to understand how to implement any change in order to make equilibrium between all the other variables also. The Burke-Levin model of organizational change. The model was developed by Warner Burke and George Levin. The basis of Burke-Levin model is that organization development interventions which are directed towards altering the organizational structure, management practices, policies and procedures result in first order change. Organizational development interventions which are directed towards modifying organizational mission and strategies, leadership and cultures result in second order change. Here the first order change relates to transactional change and the second order change relates to transformational change. In first order change, which is also called transactional change, certain elements of the organization are altered or changed and the fundamental nature of the organization remains the same. This is also called evolutionary, incremental and continuous change. However, in second order change, which is also called transformational, revolutionary, radical or discontinuous change. Nature of the organization is fundamentally altered. The model follows the leadership theory of transactional leadership and transformational leadership. Transactional leaders are those who guide or motivate their followers to attain the established goals. These leaders and followers establish a fair exchange leading towards normal performance, whereas transformational leaders are those who inspires the followers to achieve new height of performance by having a profound and extraordinary effect on their followers and hence responsible for bringing second order change. The model primarily focuses on changing the organizational climate and organizational culture. Organizational climate, which can be understood as people's perception and attitude towards the organization, are comparatively easy to change because they are related to prevailing managerial and organizational practice. On the other hand, organizational culture is defined as deep rooted assumptions, beliefs, and values which an organization hold and follow and are difficult to change. The first order change or transactional change is basically applied to alter prevailing management practices, change in work unit, which in turn change individual as well as organizational performances, leading towards organizational climate change. On the other hand, if we consider the second order change or transformational change, we must change organization mission, strategy, leadership style, or simply organizational culture. To sum up, Burke and Levin proposes organization development interventions directed towards changing mission, strategy, or fundamental changes in organizational culture, produce transformational change, and those interventions which are directed towards altering management practices, structure, and system produce transactional change in organization change. Action research model of change. It simply refers to a process of collecting data, analyzing the collected data, and selecting a change action accordingly. The action research model of change follows a scientific method of managing the organizational change. The originator of the model were Cummings and Hughes, who developed this model in the year 1989, consisting of 8 steps that is to be followed while the organization is striving to implant any planned change. The initiation of the model starts simply by collecting the relevant data concerning the expected change area, and after a complete scrutiny of the data, results are obtained which are further utilized as a guiding tool for decision making. This model not only limits its importance in implementing the change process but also has its significance in developing a general knowledge which can be utilized for the future context. The action research model consists of basic 8 steps that are problem identification, consultation with a behavioral expert, data gathering and preliminary diagnosis, feedback to client group, joint diagnosis of the problem, joint action planning, action, data gathering after action, problem identification. The first step which is taken for this purpose is to understand the reason which is emerging as a problem in implementing the change. Accurately pointing out the major reason is helpful in resolving the problems which are becoming a hurdle for the organizational development practitioners. Consultation with a behavioral expert. After identifying the various reasons for the problems that are coming in way of organizational development interventions. It is now important that these identified problems must be discussed with the behavioral experts for the relevant advice and consultation. Data gathering and preliminary diagnosis. After a detailed discussion with the expert or the change agent, the next step is to collect the data regarding the problem. For this purpose, the data can be collected by using questionnaires, schedules, observation, and by the analysis of the performance data. Feedback to key client group. The change agent puts all its efforts to collect the relevant data concerning the problem. After collecting the data, the consultant task is to provide the client all the relevant and useful data collected for the purpose. Joint diagnosis of the problem. The purpose behind the consultant sharing the information with the client lies on the fact that there must be joint exercise between both the groups to diagnose the problem and the factors responsible for the problem. Joint action planning. For solving the arise problem and eliminating the factors responsible for the same, the change agent and the managerial personnel jointly make a collective effort regarding the selection of the problem, solving methods, making consensus on the alternative course of action, and regarding the selection of the best course of action. These decisions are taken by giving due care to the various factors of business environment in which the organization works, like economic, technological, socio-cultural, etc. Action. These decisions involve taking the planned change effort in the particular direction the organization is striving hard. The actions which are taken in contrast with the relevant change relates to the installing new methods, restructuring the existing structures, and introducing a new behavioral design. Data gathering after action. The introducer of the model has made the structure of the model cyclical in nature, and therefore it does not stop or ends. After the action has taken place, new data is again collected and the whole process of the action search is again repeated. Thus, the situation is re-diagnosed and reaction is taken again. Thus, action search model presents the whole organizational change process in a properly planned manner. It comprises of the change agent acting as a consultant who normally deals with the entire process of collecting the data, diagnosing the reasons for the problem, making a collective decision making with the management in accurately driving at the solution of the problem, finally implementing the change in a planned manner. Integrative model of planned change, developed by Bullock and Batten in the year 1985. The integrative model of planned change describes the whole change process and the organizational status on similar lines. The idea that lies behind the very foundation of the model says that an organization travels through an exploration phase for the need to change and ends up on stabilizing the change by integrating it with the different organization subsystem. The process of moving from the current state to the future change state moves through a series of steps. They are exploration, planning, action, integration. Exploration phase. Here in the first stage, the organization decides of having a change in the organization or not. The change agent who is exploring the need for the change finds the various factors to validate the need for the change. Also, the change agent makes sure that the client organization is having the necessary resources which can affect the successful implementation of the change. It searches out the necessary implication for the implementation of the organizational change. Planning phase. This phase starts when the change agent ensures that there are necessary resources and commitment on the part of the organization for the implementation of the change. In this phase, a well-designed diagnosis of the problem is done by the organizational members as well as the organizational development practitioners. Action phase. This phase includes moving from the present stage to a desired future stage. The plans are implemented and are ensured that the activities moves in the same manner as is decided. For that, proper monitoring and evaluation of the process is ensured. Integration phase. This phase involves making change a part of the regular functioning by successfully integrating the organizational structures. This calls for stabilizing the change. Let's summarize what we have learned in this module. No organization is capable in the sense of avoiding the change. Applying change management is the new discipline which every organization competing needs to apply. Any organization, whether it is a profit earning or non-profit, confronts the world as it is the real place where it works. Management is confronted with the different challenges every day. Out of these challenges, globalization, technological advancement, unanticipated events, enhanced markets, complex competition are increasing day by day. Not only the new external forces, there are some internal uncertainties as well which are strong enough to have an impact. Above all, the major impact factor is the workforce, which is employed in the organization. Prediction of how people are going to respond to the change. Their expectations regarding their career prospects, lifestyle, power and working conditions do need to be focused. The impact of these changes can have a substantial effect on the business, and therefore it became necessary for the business organization to remain intact with the changes and follow a plan so as to avoid losses. After the discussion of the models, it is easy to understand that an organization is constituted some of different variables doing their tasks but are directly or indirectly linked with each other. Any change, if it is to be implemented, it must be given due care that how one variable can have its good or bad effects on the other variables. To set an organization on the change process, it needs to make a proper balance between forces to change and forces which are resistance to change. Managers are the primary change agent in an organization. By their decision-making capabilities and their role modeling behavior, they can shape the organization in the manner they want. The important thing here which needs to be taken care of what an organization wants to change. If it is organization climate change or organization culture change, and accordingly the things and change activities need to be designed. Thank you.